Welcome to the Positive Change Methods podcast with me, Andy Smith. Each episode will bring you tips, practical change formats, and new perspectives to make your life and work better right now, drawn from Appreciative Inquiry and related approaches. This episode is brought to you by the Practical Appreciative Inquiry Facilitator Training. Let me show you how to get started using Appreciative Inquiry confidently with teams and small groups. The next live online course starts soon. You can find the details and how to book your place at coachingleaders.co.uk. Okay, let's get started. Episode 20. How to conduct appreciative interviews with people who are feeling negative or who've been through a tough time. A while back, one of my Practical Appreciative Inquiry course graduates emailed me an interesting question. She was using an appreciative interview format in her academic research, working with maternity staff, doctors, midwives, and maternity support workers, who'd just worked through the COVID crisis and obviously been under a lot of pressure. She was concerned that it would seem wrong to not acknowledge how difficult the preceding few months had been, especially when, as a researcher, she hadn't been through that experience herself. On the other hand, starting off by asking, "How have the last few months been?" is not a great question from an appreciative point of view, as it could derail the conversation into complaints and venting about negative experiences before it even starts. This is what I suggested she could do. Explain that you're using appreciative inquiry for the interview. Check if they've come across the approach before. If they haven't, just in a sentence say something on the lines of, "It's an approach to change that's based not on analysing problems and looking for causes, but instead on identifying what's working and what's worked in the past, and doing more of that." If they have heard of appreciative inquiry already, then just add, "as you know," to the start of your sentence. You could go on to explain that the way it discovers what's working is to ask about best experiences, times when people overcame challenges, things they're proud of, even if these best experiences are the exception rather than the rule. This is pretty much how you'd introduce appreciative inquiry to anyone. You've framed it as a special type of conversation that focuses on the best experiences, even if the bulk of their experiences have been bad or underperforming, in order to work. But here's the crucial thing. Say, "Before we start the appreciative interview, how have the last few months been for you?" So at this point, before the interview starts, it's just two human beings talking rather than interviewer and interviewee. Saying "before we start" should mark the question as being outside of the formal interview, so they can answer however they like. Here are some other tips for handling negativity in an appreciative interview. Parking the negatives and coming back to them later. Say that you'll make a note of any negative issues and come back to them later. If your closing question is about the wishes they have for themselves, their team, or the organization in the future, the negatives can be discussed in terms of what the interviewee would like to see instead. Normalizing. Sometimes you need to let the interviewee talk about their negative experiences, accepting their right to feel this way, but without reinforcing the negativity by adding your own judgments. At the same time, you don't want to display toxic positivity, denying, invalidating, or minimizing their lived experience. So to maintain rapport, you can use a method called normalizing. This uses statements like, "Oh, that sounds tough. I imagine anyone in that situation might feel that way. That must have been a difficult situation." What you don't want to do is go on to add your own value judgment that reinforces the awfulness of the situation by agreeing with it or even amplifying their assessment of it. "Oh no, you poor thing. You must have felt terrible. What an awful thing to happen." Throughout the conversation, it's important to maintain yourself in a positive state so that you don't get dragged down by their negativity. Credit. I came across this idea of normalizing on Dion Singh's Solution Focused Leader website, tinyurl.com/Dion Singh. Returning to the positive. After listening to a problem, say you're going back to focus on when things were working at their best, even if it was just a brief moment. Acknowledging, then flipping to the positive opposite. Everything that people find wrong in an organization represents an absence of something they regard as ideal, So you can acknowledge that what they're describing is not ideal and then ask them, what would it look like if this was working at its best? Or what would you want instead of this? Next time, how to use appreciative inquiry to engage people when the topic is technical or not inspiring in itself. Thanks for listening to the Positive Change Methods podcast with me, Andy Smith. You can find the show notes at positivechangemethods.com. Please like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you like this episode, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you can review it. See you next time.